afternoon, everyone. My name is Jen Coatsworth, and I have the distinct honor of being the 2024 Chancellor of the Philadelphia Bar Association. Thank you for joining us this afternoon for an important conversation about judicial security and its impact on judicial independence and the rule of law. We have a very distinguished panel here with us this afternoon. But before we get started, I want to give a few caveats and a little bit of rules of the road as to how we'll proceed. First of all, unfortunately, Nadej Tando, who is the incoming chair of the family law section, unfortunately is not able to join us this afternoon as she came down with some severe laryngitis. So unfortunately, she's not able to join us. Also, we have with us Chief Judge Goldberg from the Eastern District, and he has a jury that is out for deliberation. So we have him for the time being, but I'm sure you'll all forgive him when he needs to step away so that he can address his jury. But with that, I also want to let you know we have some discussion prepared that we're going to speak about today. But if you have questions that you would like answered by any of the panelists, you can type those questions in the chat, and we will screen them and address them with our panelists as appropriate. And with that, I will introduce our panelists today. First, we have Chief Judge Mitchell Goldberg from the Eastern District of Pennsylvania. He was appointed to the United States Eastern District on October 31st of 2008, and he became Chief Judge just this year in March. He previously served on the Bucks County Court of Common Pleas. Judge Goldberg's career as a practicing attorney started in the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office, where he worked in both the trial and appellate divisions. And he later joined the law firm of Coase and O'Connor, where his practice focused on commercial litigation. Judge Goldberg was eventually promoted to senior partner and also served as the manager of Coasen's arson and fraud unit. Judge Goldberg returned to the public sector in 1997, serving as an assistant United States attorney for the Eastern District of Pennsylvania, where he handled mostly white-collar crime cases before both the District Court and the United States Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit. Judge Goldberg is a graduate of Temple Law School, where he was a member of Temple's first trial team, and he presently serves as an adjunct professor at Temple Law, teaching federal law and civil criminal advanced trial advocacy. And Judge Goldberg has also handled over 100 patent cases as a visiting judge in the District of Delaware. Next, we have President Judge Nina Wright Padilla. And President Judge Wright Padilla was appointed to the Philadelphia Court of Common Pleas in August of 2003. Thereafter, she was elected to the court in November of 2003, and October 31st of 2023, she was elected President Judge by her peers. Judge Wright Padilla was assigned to Family Court Domestic Relations for 9 years. Then she was transferred to the criminal section, where she presided over major criminal jury trials. She was then transferred to the civil section, where she served as a team leader and presided over civil motions and trials. Judge Wright Padilla was then transferred to the commerce program, where she served as supervising judge. And in the commerce program, she presided over disputes involving businesses and business litigation. She was formerly the chairperson of the Pennsylvania Judicial Conduct Board, and she served as a board member of the Jenkins Law Library. She has also chaired the Board of Judges, the Board of Revision of Taxes, and she serves on numerous other boards of judges committees. She served as co-chair of the Board of Judges Judicial Fellows Committee, and she participates in the ABA Judicial Intern Opportunity Program, regularly providing internship opportunities for law students. Judge Wright Padilla also serves as a judge and mentor for the University of Maryland Black Law Students Association mock trial program. Next, we have President Judge Francis Shields, who was born and raised in Northeast Philadelphia, and he brings a unique background to his role as a Philadelphia Municipal Court judge. Judge Shields began in the trades as a member of the Sprinkler Fitters Union Local 692, where he served on the executive board and contract negotiating committee. While working full-time, he earned a BS in industrial relations from St. Joe's University and a JD from Temple University Law School. For 25 years, Judge Shields practiced law representing individuals, unions, corporations, and government agencies in diverse legal matters. He was then appointed to the municipal court in 2012, and later was elected to full terms. And he presided over thousands of cases across criminal and civil divisions. Judge Shields was elected by his colleagues as president judge of the Philadelphia Municipal Court, and he has served in that role since January of 2024. Next, we have Charles Chip Becker, who is an attorney at Klein Inspector, where he represents plaintiffs in personal injury matters and has responsibility for the firm's post-trial and appellate practice. Chip serves as a judge on the Pennsylvania Court of Judicial Discipline by appointment of Governor Wolf, and he co-chairs the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania's Historical Commission. He also vice chairs the Supreme Court's Commission on Judicial Independence, which is the role that brought him here today. He previously served multiple terms on the Supreme Court's Appellate Court's Procedural Rules Committee, and he has served on its Tricentennial Commission. He's an adjunct professor at the University of Pennsylvania Carey School of Law, where he teaches state constitutional law and previously taught appellate practice. Chip is a fellow of the American Academy of Appellate Lawyers and a member of the American Law Institute, a board member of the Philadelphia Trial Lawyers Association and the Lawyers Club of Philadelphia, and he is a past president of the Third Circuit Bar Association. He is a graduate of Williams College and Yale Law School, and Chip served as a law clerk for Judge Sandra Lynch of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the First Circuit. Next, we have Leslie Greenspan, who is a trial lawyer and partner at Tucker Law Group, where she focuses primarily on employment discrimination cases, civil rights litigation, and complex commercial matters. She has led trial teams in both state and federal court and has handled all aspects of litigation from the filing of the complaint through expert reports, dispositive motions, motions in limine, and jury verdicts. She has even handled appeals to the Third Circuit and made new law there on the FMLA. She routinely and successfully represents clients in connection with preliminary injunction hearings. Leslie is active with the Philadelphia Bar Association's Federal Courts Committee, and she currently serves as its vice chair. She is also active with the Forum of Executive Women, where she serves as vice chair of the Mentoring Committee, and she is on the board of Women Against Abuse. And finally, we have with us today Meredith Seitzer, who is the chief of the Defender Association's Special Litigation Division, a trial unit dedicated to the representation of indigent clients charged with sex and domestic violence offenses in Philadelphia County. Meredith began her career at the Defender Association as a trial attorney and later joined the Defender Association's appeals unit, where she litigated direct appeals and served as amicus counsel in matters before the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. Meredith currently serves as the co-chair of the criminal justice section of the Philadelphia Bar Association, and she is a member of the Pennsylvania Indigent Defense Advisory Committee's Professional Development and Training Subcommittee. She's a graduate of Tufts University and Temple University Beasley School of Law, where she has taught criminal appellate procedure as a member of the law school's adjunct faculty. So, as you can see, we have a wide range of practice areas, and that is why we have asked our panelists to participate today, as they come from unique experiences in connection with the court system. So first, I'm going to ask our panelists, and we'll start with Chief Judge Goldberg. If you can tell our attendees, how has the rise in courthouse security incidents impacted your role or your position in the judicial system, including potentially the limitations in recourse for resolution of those issues. And how's the federal system and its resources different from the state court?
Good afternoon, and Chancellor Coatsworth, thank you for inviting me to talk about what I think is a very, very important topic to the entire legal community, not just the judiciary. I'm going to expand your question a little bit to not just courthouse security issues, because a lot of security issues occur outside of the courthouse, and just make it a little more general. So to try to be succinct about it, one thing we can all agree on, because statistics have borne this out, are facts. Threats against judges, state, federal, and otherwise, have risen exponentially. They've gone through the roof, to be more plain spoken about it. I'm going to go with like the last 10 years. I've heard various stats. I think in the last 2 years, threats against federal judges have doubled. I've heard they've gone up 600%, but they are really, really alarmingly on the rise, as well as, maybe not to such a high extent, threats against prosecutors and lawyers. But unfortunately, judges are taking the brunt of it. I want to recognize and say to my brothers and sisters in the Philadelphia Court of Common Pleas and the judges there, I recognize with the United States Marshal Service, we have more resources. However, that hasn't prevented some really awful things from happening, violence-wise and threats of violence-wise to the federal judiciary. So I would say it's a common problem to all judges, and by extension, the legal community. So here's my 2 cents on why I think this has happened, and I'll try to be as candid as possible. Let me start with the concept that it is obviously okay to criticize the judiciary. I certainly did it when I was trying cases and I got rulings I thought were completely in error. Appellate lawyers go to appellate courts all the time and say the judge got it wrong. I'm sure I have a jury deliberating, and by the way, I think I'll be able to stay as long as the jury doesn't have a question or a verdict. I'm sure, one of the lawyers or both lawyers are saying, oh, I got some rulings wrong, and it's okay. We all do it. Do judges sometimes come to court unprepared? Sure. So fair criticism of judges is necessary and proper, and it's part of the job that we do. I mean, we know we have to have thick skins because we're going to rule one way or another. But what has occurred now is a completely different dialogue, and I'm going to well, there's been some comments made recently, maybe in the last few years, by way of example, that judges are now corrupt. They're on the take. They are making decisions based on politics. One comment was so extraordinary. The Chief Justice of the United States issued a press release, which is very rare, saying, and I'm not going to get the exact wording right, there are no political judges, there are no Bush or Biden judges, or whatever the terms you use for the presidents. There are judges. Some federal judges are political appointees, but we put that aside. But things like judges are on the take, corrupt, and political, that's the norm. That's become a norm conversation. I'm going to give you 2 very recent examples that jumped out to me in the news, I think within the last few weeks. So the case where there was an acquittal of the Marine in the New York City subway, where the victim was Jordan Neely, where there was a chokehold. And he was acquitted. He's found not guilty. And of course, that upset the father of the victim, but he called the entire judicial system rigged, as opposed to saying what used to be, I don't agree with the result. my son will miss him forever, things like that. The reason there was an acquittal was because the judicial system was rigged. I read something over the weekend where a hugely, I'm not going to name names, you can probably figure out who it is, a hugely respected business person referred to a judge in the Delaware Chancellery Court, viewed by many as one of the most respected courts in the country, referred to the judge as, quote, absolutely corrupt and totally crazy. So the first part of the problem is that people are listening to these comments, and it's becoming the norm amongst dialogue as it relates to the judicial system. As it relates to the increasing threats and security of judges, a lot of our docket, and I think the judges in Philadelphia Court of Common Pleas and Municipal Court would agree, a lot of our docket is pro se litigants. Some of those litigants have either minimal or severe mental health issues. So when you, like most of our threats here, I can't be specific, but they don't come from super dangerous criminals, although they do sometimes. They come from pro se litigants who have mental health issues, who are listening to this dialogue that's out there and thinking that this type of rhetoric in varying degrees is acceptable. And sometimes it's really ramped up by way of threats made to chambers. It's really ramped up by posters of judges being plastered all over Philadelphia. I've been, if you want to see what I look like outside of the Zoom, you could probably find my picture with the term corrupt judge written underneath it somewhere in Philadelphia. I also am honored to have been placed on some blogs with the same caption underneath, or it increases a little bit more into threats on the phone, threats by email, and then real threats where people actually act out. The absolute most horrific occurred during the pandemic with a New Jersey judge's family being shot and her son being killed by a pro se mentally ill litigant. So this all sounds, it's sort of, I'm looking at the mirror, it sort of mirrors the, I'm looking at the window, it sort of mirrors the day. It's very dark and depressing presentation. So I'll try to add some positives to it, which is like, what can we do about this? Instead of just worrying about it. And believe me, we spend a lot of time on judicial security now, a lot of time here. Well, I think we can engage in forums like this. So I commend the Bar Association and the Chancellor for allowing us to, talk to the lawyers about this. The lawyers can help here. The lawyers can go to community events and say, I'm proud to be in the system. Judges aren't perfect, but they try to do the right thing. Juries aren't perfect, but they try to do the right thing. If you don't like the result, it doesn't mean the judge was corrupt. If you don't like the result, it doesn't mean the judge was on the take. You can take on more speaking events. You can go out into your community in non-legal settings, and you can talk about how great this system of justice is here. You can have a dialogue with your family and friends. And when you hear offhanded comments like, oh, that judge must have been a Republican judge, that's why he ruled that way. You can say, well, that doesn't really work that way. I know that judge, I know you didn't understand or like the ruling, but judges don't, they don't roll that way. And, the organization that Chip Becker's involved in, that the Supreme Court is heading up, these are things that can help turn the conversation around. But the conversation's in a really bad place right now. And I know quite a few really, really good lawyers who don't want to be judges because they're afraid of their safety. And that's very depressing news to hear. So dialogue, dialogue, dialogue. And if you're proud of our system and honored to be a part of it, as I am, tell your friends and family and get the word out. We've got to turn the negative dialogue around. And I hope I didn't talk too long, Jen.
Not at all. Thank you, Chief Judge Goldberg. President Judge Wright Padilla, let's go to you next. What are some ways that you've seen the impact of judicial security issues in the courthouse and outside of the courthouse impact your role as a president judge, as a team leader, and all of the different divisions in which you've worked in the Philadelphia First Judicial District? Oh, you're on mute.
Thank you. I want to thank you, Chancellor Coatsworth, for having this forum. It's such an important topic, and I think each one of us on this call, we really want this forum. We really want to be able to talk about it. As a judge, sometimes we can be a little stilted in our conversation because of the oath that we took. But security, I think, supersedes some of that. Security is very, very important. In terms of my role as a judge and how security has affected that, I mean, as a judge, we're all leaders, and president judges are leaders of the court. And we're all concerned about the same thing. Many of the things Judge Mitchell Goldberg was just talking about. We're concerned about safety and security of people, all the people that use the courts. And it's not just the judges, it's the parties that come to court, the litigants, the people, the victims, witnesses, attorneys, court staff. We've all received complaints from people within our courthouses, other judges, other colleagues, courtroom staff. We've all received complaints about security in terms of not just the safety in court, but also in terms of transporting of witnesses or inmates to and from the prison. The sheriff even staffs the courthouse. So when you walk into the Criminal Justice Center, the Stout Center, you'll have metal detectors there you have to go through. That has to be operated by the sheriff. If we don't have enough sheriffs there, they can't be operational. Every single courthouse has that in Philadelphia: family court building, municipal court building, Widener building, traffic court. They all have that. And without the sheriffs there, it's not possible for us to function. Transport of prisoners is important. There are things that happen while the inmates are being transferred to and from the courthouse. It's a big problem. And really, the proper administration of justice really has to account for these threats to our security. People have to feel safe. If there's one place that everyone goes to, I remember when I was in family court thinking about this so much, people are so upset whenever they come to court for whatever reason. The one place you expect to feel safe is in court. And so it's very important to have that security. It's hard to even have your case conducted properly without that security. So those are some of the top things on my mind. I know Judge Shields has other things that he would like to say about that.
And with that, we'll turn to you, President Judge Shields.
Okay, Jen, thanks so much again for having me on this panel. And I do have a few things I'd like to add. I mean, Judge Goldberg and Judge Wright Padilla have covered an awful lot, but in the municipal court, you know, I think it's fair to say we're more hands-on probably than any other court, and we interact with the public more than any other court on a day-to-day basis. just because of the jurisdiction that we have in the types of cases that we hear. So this is a judicial security, not just judicial security, but security as a whole in terms of the court is a big issue for us. Now, for a long time, as Judge Wright Padilla was pointing out, we've had, our security was essentially handled by the sheriff's office, and we had sheriffs in every one of those buildings that Judge Wright Padilla mentioned, and in all the courtrooms for security, but also they're the movers and shakers in the courthouse. They're the ones who bring in the custody, the defendants that are in custody, and they're the ones that bring the custodies up to the courtrooms to have their hearings heard. And more recently, we haven't had that. There could be and maybe and probably are all sorts of different reasons why we haven't had that. But the bottom line is we now are sitting in courtrooms for in many cases all day long, in some cases for a significant period of time without a sheriff in the room. And it causes a security problem for us, but it also has a ripple effect that's not just related to security. The security issue is we have courtrooms that are full. For example, let's take the preliminary hearing rooms. We may have 30 to 40 cases on our list on a given day scheduled for preliminary hearings. So naturally, we have police officers that are going to testify, complaining witnesses, victims that are going to come in and testify, family members for those complaining witnesses and victims, family members for the defendants who are going to be brought in if they're in custody or who come there themselves. And the courtrooms are packed. These people are sitting almost on top of each other. It can, if the judge doesn't handle it properly, or is unable to handle it properly, it can cause a lot of tension. It can create a lot of bad mojo, so to speak, in the courtroom, and everybody's on edge. And you've got to be, in an instant, somebody can do something. Somebody's looking across the courtroom at the other, at somebody from the other side of the table. Somebody takes their phone out, and all of a sudden they're videoing with their phone the police officer who's testifying up on the stand, or the complaining witnesses, and so that intimidates people. And these things are happening all the time. Now, when you have the sheriff in the room, or some other security, if that's the situation, I don't know what happens with the marshals with Judge Goldberg, but in our rooms, if we have the sheriff in the room, and they're there the whole day, just their presence can help to prevent those incidents from happening, right? And those incidents get violent, and they get, if people get hurt, and if you have the sheriff in the room, the people who are going to do something like that are less inclined to do it if the sheriff's there. So it helps to prevent it from even happening to begin with. But also, if it does happen and the sheriff's there, then you've got a sheriff who can intervene and stop it before it becomes a catastrophe. So that's the initial security issue that we're faced with. And if we don't have the sheriffs in the room, that's the problem that we have to deal with, and we're dealing with it an awful lot on a day-to-day basis in our courtrooms. But beyond that, as I've said before, there's sort of a ripple effect, and it kind of goes to what Judge Goldberg was talking about. And that is, if these people come every day to see this, or one of the ripple effects is, and they see that this is the way things are operating in these courtrooms, these lay people, witnesses and family members, and even police officers, they see this kind of chaos taking place in the courtrooms. They begin to lose respect for the court, for the system itself, and for the judges, and for the courts in general. And that causes even more problems, because that puts them in a mindset when they do come in that they don't have the respect that's necessary, or that they don't have the respect that may make them think twice about doing something that could cause problems in the courtroom. So it just kind of blossoms when you have that kind of atmosphere in the courthouse. The other problem that it helps to create and magnify is, if you have these people who come into our courtrooms every day, and I'm speaking, and I'm not just speaking about the criminal courtrooms. I'm talking. We have jurisdiction over landlord-tenant court, which is a court where a majority of the litigants are pro se, especially the tenant on the tenant side. And when these people come in, and they're in the criminal cases, for example, they come there to testify in a case. Maybe they were the victim of a robbery or an assault. That takes a lot of courage, right? And so they come in and they sit there all day, and their case doesn't get heard. It's got to get continued, and they've got to come back, and it's got to get continued because we don't have a sheriff who can bring the custody defendant up from the cells in the basement into the courtroom. We have to sit all day waiting to get a sheriff because we don't have enough sheriffs. So they sit there all day and they wait. Police officers who are on last out, they sit there all day and they wait, and they have to go back to work, within hours. If this happens to them over and over again, it's human nature. They're going to say, I'm not coming back for the next hearing. That's all there is to it. I've had enough of this nonsense. And then they begin to lose respect because they don't really understand what the problems are and why they have to come back. They just know that they had to take off of work, or they had to get somebody else to take care of their children. They have lives. They're human beings. They have other things that they have to take care of. And so this kind of thing, aside from being a security issue, also is an issue or a problem that discourages people from participating. And again, all that does is snowball and makes the cases take longer, and maybe they end up getting withdrawn or dismissed when they shouldn't. If everybody were able to participate in the fashion that they want to. And so the problem just blossoms out. Fundamentally, it's a security problem, but it's really a much bigger problem that affects everything, including what Judge Goldberg was alluded to earlier, and that is the necessary respect that people have to have for the court in order for the court to function properly. I hope I didn't take too long.
Jennifer, I want to chime in, and I know there's other people, but this is so badly ironic. As Judge Shields is talking, I got a text from our United States Marshal who said that there was a shooting today at the federal courthouse, which I did not know about until 5 minutes ago. Someone approached the Sylvia Rambo courthouse in the Middle District in Harrisburg. Had some beef apparently with, this is developing investigation, had some problem with a judge or other court person, was turned away, came back with a knife, tried to enter the courthouse and was shot. So if anyone on the Zoom thinks that we're, complaining here for no reason, there you go.
Absolutely. Wow. That's awful to hear. Hopefully everyone is safe. But, obviously, except for the perpetrator, it doesn't sound like they fared too well, but hopefully the judicial personnel and everyone else who's at the courthouse is safe. President Judge Ray Padilla, I know you were going to jump in, and I want to give you that opportunity, and just then going after that, I also want both you and Judge Shields to speak a little bit about the administrative order that came out last week. I think we've heard good evidence already as to why the administrative order was necessary, but I'm going to ask you both to sort of explain a little bit about what it said and what your intent was behind the order. But Judge Ray Padilla, I'm going to open the floor to you first. And then before we do that, I'm going to ask Meredith and Leslie and Chip to jump in as well.
All right, you want me to, okay, so I had a very brief comment. I mean, just in light of the gravity of what Judge Goldberg just said, it seems so, I don't know. Anyway, so I was just gonna say that having the sheriffs present in the courtroom in civil, it's really important because it's somewhat of a validation of the process. When it's just the judge and the parties and the lawyers, even if there's a jury, the sheriff adds a component of validation. The sheriff also is helpful for enforcement of orders and such, but it just gives it that validation so people understand, hey, this is really serious. This is an important issue. So that's all I was going to add. But I agree with everything Judge Shields said. He explained in great detail all of the concerns that all of us have.
No, absolutely. So before we go back to that issue with regard to the administrative order, I'm going to go to Leslie first and then Meredith, and then Chip, I'm going to ask you to jump in as to what the Supreme Court's Judicial Independence Commission is doing in response to some of the issues that have been raised. So Leslie, we'll go to you first and then Meredith, and to talk a little bit about, as practitioners, you know, how courthouse security impacts your practice.
Sure. So I was thinking about what Chief Judge Goldberg said about what we as lawyers can and should be doing. And you know, maybe you all have had this similar experience. You know, you're with family at, let's say, Thanksgiving, and you're talking about this experience you just had and this adverse ruling you possibly just got, hypothetically. And you know, someone, a loyal family member, you know, immediately jumps in and wants to say something negative. That is a perfect opportunity for, you know, we are with judges all the time. We are thinking about judges, talking to judges, appearing before judges, writing to judges. We have so much interaction that it's incumbent upon us to then jump in at that moment and correct the record. And in fact, in preparation for this panel, I had a minute or two to take a quick look at the Pennsylvania rules of professional responsibility, which I hadn't read in full since I had to study for the bar exam. But I was looking, and in fact, in the preamble alone, there are at least 4 different references to the fact that we as lawyers have an obligation to the judges to step in, to make that kind of statement. And I'm not going to read any lengthy provisions from the rules, but should you find yourself with a few moments, take a look, specifically at preamble paragraph 1, that we as lawyers are members of the legal profession. We have a special responsibility to the quality of justice. I mean, this also is something that makes us feel good as lawyers, that we have such an important role in the system to help in this way. Preamble paragraph 5. A lawyer should demonstrate respect for the legal system and for those who serve it, including judges, other lawyers, and public officials. I didn't realize, if I ever knew, I'd forgotten that was in the very preamble of our rules that govern us. Paragraph 6, a lawyer should further the public's understanding of and confidence in the rule of law and the justice system. And then finally, paragraph 13, lawyers play a vital role in the preservation of society. And it talks about how we have a job to do in terms of our role, our relationship with the judicial system. So also, as Chief Judge Goldberg said, you know, these judges are trying to get to the right answers. They are trying to do the right thing. You know, just like you see, you know, just for instance, yesterday I'm watching youth basketball and I'm watching the refs. They're doing the best they can. They're calling it the way they see it. They're trying to get the right answer. And sometimes they don't get it right. And that's why there are appeals, and there is a rule, there is the rule of law, there is order, there are systems in place. If something was missed, if something was overseen, that's why we have the appeal system. But again, it's not because somebody is corrupt or something is rigged or something is wrong or broken in the system at large. The judges are trying to get it right. These are tough, tough people taking on tough jobs. And I thought a lot about Judge Salas as we were preparing for this today. I mean, going through the absolute unimaginable. And then still, I took a quick look at Lexis. She's issued over 300 opinions since this happened. I mean, she has continued to persist and persevere and do justice and do right. So these are tough people doing tough jobs, trying to get the right answers. And it is incumbent upon us as lawyers to stand up for them.
Thanks, Leslie. Meredith?
Sure. Thank you, Jen. I mean, I think everything that everybody has already said shows that this is a pretty complex issue that's not easily, solved overnight. But I just want to add a few comments from the practitioner's perspective, to echo what Judge Shields and Judge Wright Padilla said about what happens in the Criminal Justice Center in Philadelphia. I mean, my colleagues and I, other members of the section, that the defenders, district attorney's office, there's a general feeling of uneasiness that exists in the CJC that I think never existed before, knowing that there's a serious shortage of sheriffs. So from a security perspective, as a practitioner, for myself, for my clients, for my colleagues, I think everybody's kind of treading lightly, because you're never really sure what the temperature is that particular day. But then also the shortage of sheriffs causes delays with the proceedings themselves, which is a huge issue. And as an attorney, it has caused me personally to have to make, challenging decisions about how to proceed with a case. Do I waive my client's presence with his or her permission in order to have a hearing go forward, knowing that the sheriff is not available to bring my client up into the courtroom? But I don't want to risk the hearing being continued, for example, like a bail hearing, if I know it's meritorious and my client has a chance of release. And I've been in that position where I've had to go downstairs to the sub-basement and have that conversation about waiving their presence at that hearing because of the shortage of sheriffs, because we're 11th, 12th in line to get a sheriff. And I think it's important to note that the line sheriffs who are working in the CJC and in the family court building, they're on overdrive all the time. And I think, it's important to acknowledge the position that they're in, and this is not their choice, but they're doing, what they can, to try to protect people in the courthouse, have proceedings go forward, but, they're in a tough spot as well. But that's actually, that's what's happening on the day-to-day in Philadelphia. And I 100% agree with Judge Shields, what Judge Shields said about particularly municipal court. But to comment also on a few things that Judge Goldberg mentioned, with respect to the broader issue of the lack of public trust in the judiciary and what we can do about it. Judge Goldberg mentioned, pro se litigants in particular, and the frustrations that comes from representing yourself. And I think that signals the need to ensure greater access to justice in the system. Investing in court-appointed counsel. We at the Defender Association were appointed to a certain percentage of cases in the city of Philadelphia, but we can't represent everybody. Especially due to conflicts. And so court-appointed counsel steps in to represent when we have conflicts. And, they are not, they don't have the same funding that other, groups do. They're missing investigators. They don't have access to social services. And so, their clients, despite how hard those attorneys work, are sometimes at a detriment because of a lack of resources. So, we might be able to improve the system and how pro se litigants in particular, go through the system if they have the opportunity to, access counsel in a way that others, are able to do so. And with respect to Judge Goldberg's comment about engaging with the public. I don't think it's any surprise that there's a perception that judges are just inaccessible. I've had the great privilege of appearing in front of a lot of really wonderful judges in the Criminal Justice Center and in family court, where, you know, we can have conversations and, you know, you get to know a judge, and the public doesn't have that same ability. So I do think it's really important to have public forums like this, and judge-led trainings and discussions. You know, last year I participated as an attendee in Justice Doherty's Autism in the Courts initiative, which was one of the best trainings I have ever attended. And, you know, you see Justice Doherty and everybody else who was involved in the presentation, you see them from, you know, a human perspective, and hearing about their concern for people who go through the system with certain disabilities. You know, you don't hear that very often, because judges, you know, aren't allowed at the on the bench to comment generally publicly about, you know, their personal feelings about something. So to hear a justice in particular talking about life experiences and, you know, how encouraging people to be open-minded, those kinds of conversations, I think, go a long way. And so when that barrier can come down between the public and the judiciary, I think we're in a much better place to continue to build public trust back up.
Thanks, Meredith. Before I turn it over to Chip to talk a little bit about what the Pennsylvania Supreme Court's Judicial Commission in our Judicial Independence Commission is doing and trying to help address some of these concerns, I just want to make it known. So some folks are putting questions you can enter your questions in the Q&A section, not in the chat section, which I believe has been disabled for the participants. But you can enter questions in the Q&A section below. And we will try to get to some of those in just a minute, but I want to give Chip an opportunity to talk about some of the things that the commission is doing, so we can hear about how we're starting to help address the problems.
Jen, thank you. Thank you for including me. And let me just say at the outset that I'm really happy and honored and moved to have the opportunity to be part of this conversation with so many distinguished judges and practitioners. I'm really glad to be here and to be learning from all of you. I'm sure I reflect the feelings of the entire audience when I say that this is just a remarkable group of people and already a great discussion. As far as the Judicial Independence Commission is concerned, let me say that the Judicial Independence Commission was founded or created in 2006 by then Chief Justice Cappy. The context for, and I won't give you the long version of the history, but I'll just say that the context for the creation of the Judicial Independence Commission was the fact that in response to public outcry over the legislative and judicial pay raise legislation that was roiling the Commonwealth at the time, you may recall that there were 2 retention elections for a Supreme Court, and one justice, then Justice Nigro, was not retained. Justice Newman was retained, but Justice Nigro was not retained as a result of I mean, I don't want to overcharacterize it, but a misdirected public anger. Or there was public anger towards the legislature, which really came out in against Justice Nigro, leading again to his not being retained. It was at that time that Chief Justice Cappy felt or was conscious of the fact that judges are limited in their ability to speak out about their role and what they do and how the judiciary works as part of a constitutional system of government. And it seemed to him that there ought to be a commission or some way that the court could educate folks on that issue, hence the creation of the Judicial Independence Commission. So the Judicial Independence Commission did its work for a number of years, which was in the nature of, usually a couple of times a year, there would be some sort of program on some dimension of civics or the role of courts in civil society. And many of those programs were very good programs and important in their own terms and had audience as well. But I would say that around the pandemic, for a variety of reasons, the commission really fell off and lay fallow for a number of years. It was then recently that Chief Justice Todd, I think Chief Judge Goldberg and all of you feeling the themes that, or feeling the feelings that all of us have been conscious of and watching unfold in American life, thought it was important to re-energize the Judicial Independence Commission. And so in the last several months, she has done that, and she has made the really excellent choice of appointing Judge Mary Jane Bowes of the Superior Court to chair the commission. For those of you who know Judge Bowes, you will know that she is a person of enormous energy, integrity, and intelligence, and is already, and we're already seeing that in the many emails and all the things that are happening under Judge Bowes' leadership already. In addition, the Chief Justice has appointed a very robust commission, and around the commission or the commissioner, she's appointed a number of academic and retired judicial advisors. So it is what has been created now is the framework for, I think, a really powerful organization, which is, I think, an appropriate response to the different circumstance in which we find ourselves today. And I think Chief Judge Goldberg, you may have alluded to this, that the attitude around the judiciary and the threats to the judiciary look categorically different post-pandemic than they do pre-pandemic. And the challenge, the institutional response to judicial independence, I think, therefore looks different. So this commission is now on a ground floor. What is the commission looking to do? So I think one challenge before us is identifying the full scope of I won't call it the problem, but identifying the full scope of the challenge. And we've already started talking about the various dimensions of judicial independence. This commission really needs to sort of think internally and think out loud with others about what judicial independence means to us today in the context of our current moment. A related thing that we should be doing and will be doing is reaching out to our brothers and sisters all across the country. There are other commissions like the Judicial Independence Commission that have been created by other state Supreme Courts. It would be, judicial independence is not a Pennsylvania issue, it's a national issue, and it would be appropriate for us to figure out who our partners and colleagues are across the country in states and in the federal community as well, to create a larger team to be thinking about and working on these issues. I have no doubt that in connection with all of this, one thing that we will be doing is trying to build out a robust website where we can, again, kind of illustrate the nature, the history, the scope of the challenge, and to provide resources that can help people in Pennsylvania and beyond to meet this moment. It is my feeling, and I know it's something that I've discussed with Judge Bowes, and I know something that the Chief shares, that Pennsylvania has always been the Keystone State. It remains one of the most important states, commonwealths in our country, and it is appropriate for people wherever they are in the country, when they are confronting a problem or a challenge, to ask themselves, what are they doing in Pennsylvania? I want people around the country to be asking themselves, what are they doing in Pennsylvania? To be looking at our website, to be gathering, to be interacting with us, and to view Pennsylvania as a thought leader and a strong, robust, active partner in this work. So there's other things that I could talk about. I'm sure there will be a speakers bureau. We will think about, can we develop a draft, something like a draft sample speech. For example, if President Judge Shields or whoever, any judge, wanted to go out to somewhere in their community and talk about judicial independence, is there something that the Judicial Independence Commission can provide as a freestanding speech that can at least be the core of something that the person wants to tailor or take pieces of, however they wish to do, to make this work easier for people to do out there in public. And again, more generally, wherever it takes us, it is the intention of the Judicial Independence Commission to seek to be a leader in these discussions in Pennsylvania, a leader in these discussions in the Commonwealth, and in that way to serve the Supreme Court and the judiciary, but more broadly the principle of constitutional government. So that's the work before the Judicial Independence Commission. We are on the ground floor of that work. Again, recognizing that this commission has been around since 2006, but also recognizing that I think this landscape is very different in the post-pandemic environment. And therefore the response needs to be that much more strong and robust. So having said all of that, if I can, Chancellor Coatsworth, if I can just have the floor for a couple more minutes, I just wanted to suggest, that judicial independence is something that we're thinking about right now. But I just want to remind people that there is actually an intellectual and political history to the idea of judicial independence. It was in the category of hundreds of years ago, but not thousands of years ago, right? In the 1600s, for example, when the English courts were doing their thing in London, those judges were actually employees of the king, right? They worked for the king. They could be fired by the king. There was no such thing as the judicial branch as an independent body of government. Our assumptions about what a judiciary is did not exist in the 1600s in our then not American, but our Anglo-American, mostly Anglo intellectual and political tradition. The idea that there was a thing called a judiciary, which was its own branch of government, is something that evolved, frankly, in an important way in Pennsylvania across the 16 and 1700s. The idea that judges, for example, would serve on good behavior. That was a significant innovation. The idea that judges would have a salary that was guaranteed. The idea that judges could be impeached. We think of impeachment as, gosh, it's really hard to impeach somebody. But if you're in the 1700s, impeachment is a powerful feature of judicial independence. You know why? Because impeachment means you can't be fired. Impeachment means you have to be charged. And what is an impeachment? It's a trial. It's actually a trial before a jury, and which has to result in a conviction. So our framework around impeachment today is really very different. But these ideas of salary, tenure for good behavior, impeachment, culminating in the 1780s and early 1790s with the idea of the judiciary as a separate branch of government, like Article 3 of the United States Constitution or Article 5 of the Pennsylvania Constitution, reposing an independence, a structural independence in the judiciary. This is an intellectual and political tradition that has been developing. And much of this has to do in the early years when we think about judicial independence, a lot of this has to do with what's inside the judge's mind. The independence of judicial thought, the latitude of a judge to make a decision that doesn't make the king happy. I can make the king unhappy, and that's okay because he can't fire me, right? That is where judicial independence actually starts. By the way, judicial immunity, the idea that I can't be prosecuted for making the decision that someone is unhappy with. All of these sort of start with an assumption that the problem is what's in the judge's mind. This conversation is, I think, certainly educating me and I think maybe illuminating for all of us the idea that judicial independence today, I think, has to mean something. It does mean, and has to mean something more, because we're not just talking about the judge's latitude to rule one way or another way. We're not talking about whether the judicial system is perceived as having integrity, having stability, whether it's a safe space, right? We're not just talking about the security of the judge's person. We're talking about the security of witnesses, the security of lawyers. We're talking about the security of physical courthouses, right? And all of this goes to a larger question about how do people feel about the judiciary? What is it that they think of, right? Are judges just legislators in robes? Is this just another dimension of the hurly-burly of politics? Or is the judiciary to reuse a phrase, is it a safe space? Is it a space of repose, of thoughtfulness, of independence, where quiet, even if you want to think of it in those terms, where important, moving, deeply personal and deeply important issues can be worked out in a way that is measured and fair, right? Think about what law is. Law is, and Meredith, I'm thinking of you, law is, in a real way, the sanctioned violence of our society. We can take people's liberty away. We can put them in jail. We can separate their children from parents. We can take their money. We can take their lives, right? Law is institutionalized violence. And I don't mean that in a pejorative way. I'm just saying that's what it is. And for our society to sanction that, we have to believe that this is happening for a reason that means something, that it's not just because of what this guy thinks or what that guy thinks at any given moment in time, or who's up or who's down in terms of the politics of the day. We all understand that people believe in the robe, people believe in what judges do, or the decisions that judges make, because they believe in the person in the robe, right? And more broadly, we believe, or are willing to believe, in the judicial institution, in the decisions that our judges make, the institutions that arise out of our judicial systems, because we believe that the judiciary is and represents something more than just the moment, the politics of the moment. And I'll just say two things in closing, which is that as someone who has practiced in our appellate courts for a long time and had a lot of occasions to be in some very beautiful courtrooms, something that I actually think about when I'm in the Supreme Court room, for example, in Harrisburg or in Philadelphia or lots of places, is that it's actually very moving, right? To be in these beautiful spaces with these very smart people, with all of the procedural and substantive kind of trappings and finery around it, and this high level conversation that we're having, all to get to the right decision, right? That is not something that happens in every part of the world. It just doesn't, right? There are billions of people in this globe who do not get to have their disputes resolved in the Harrisburg courtroom of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. And it is not to be taken for granted. And it's actually one of the great blessings of life in this country, that this is how we do things. And I have sort of, undertaken a practice of actually having a moment of appreciating that before I get up and say whatever it is that I have to say at the lectern. But nothing is eternal and nothing is necessary. So this work of thinking about judicial independence and beyond it, judicial security, speaking as a judge of the Court of Judicial Discipline, judicial ethics and judicial discipline, all of these are part of a larger project of thinking about the dignity and the integrity and the feeling of our judiciary as an important dimension, a place of repose, of fairness, that is its place in our constitutional system. And it's obviously it's a big challenge now, but frankly it's been a challenge since the dawn of the Republic and will always be a challenge. And so this is just our turn to try to continue the work.
And so building on that, Chip, and what Chief Judge Goldberg said, the judiciary is instilled with this authority, and as you put it, to have great powers. But the problem, I think, is that we're seeing in the derogation of that, and the fact that that is being undermined, and the sentiment around that authority is being undermined in a number of different ways. So going back to Chief Judge Goldberg's point about that, we did get a question about whether or not the rise in the attacks and accusations against the judiciary reflect a larger, more widespread attitude in society against all kinds of social institutions and the structure of our democracy, including Congress, presidency, corporations, election machinery, and sort of the fundamental basics of our democratic society. And are the attacks against the judiciary evidence of that, or and is it evidence of a more widespread phenomenon beyond America? Do we know if these similar attacks are being felt in other democratic countries across the world? So I'll open that question up if anybody wants to take a stab at it.
Well, I would say something about worldwide, but I will just say when someone else answers, I have some thoughts about the worldwide dimensions of this.
May I say something? I think that what you're talking about, Jen, I think it's true. I think it all has a big effect on the courts, just as the attitude that people have about elected officials, and now it's grown to the attitude they have about their judges, elected or otherwise. But I think it has a more serious impact on the judges because to piggyback a little bit on what Mr. Becker had to say, I think fundamentally that with regard to the judges on all courts, the real foundation of our authority and is respect of the people in the community. If the people lose the respect for us, we've lost everything. Okay, if they don't have any respect for us, like the kind that Mr. Becker described, when he goes into a courtroom and he stops and he thinks, and I think he, enhances that respect by thinking about the place where he's in and the people that he's dealing with and the decisions that are being made there. If people lose that respect, the courts have lost everything if they lose the respect of the people. That's what I think. Despite the rules, regulations, whatever else gives us authority, if we don't have the respect of the people, the whole thing starts to deteriorate. And I think that that's why I say that this disdain that people are starting to have for elected officials and people of authority in general, it has a much bigger and more serious impact on the courts than it does on everybody else, because fundamentally it's the respect that is the foundation of our authority. If you were talking about the president, or even Congress, not so much. Their authority is I think more fundamentally based in the rules and regulations and whatever else gives them their power. But the respect aspect of this is so much more important and so much larger than it with the courts than it is generally with everybody else.
Right.
It's my 2 cents.
I would like to also comment on that respect issue. It's a really important part of the litigation process, respect. And it's not that judges have big heads and we want you to respect us. We want you to follow our orders. We want you to listen to what we say. We take the time to hear the case and we want our orders to be followed. Having the sheriffs in the courtroom, going back to that example, what I said earlier, it offers the opportunity for people to understand, oh, this is law enforcement and they are respecting the judge. The sheriffs have guns, people with guns in the courtroom in uniform. They're offering respect. And it's important that the people understand that, because they'll follow our orders. I keep going back to family court. If the litigants see the sheriff in the courtroom, they're more likely to understand the import of the order that I give. And it's the same thing in civil. If the people, we've already talked about the importance in criminal, but it's the same thing in civil. The jurors, the litigants, they have to understand that. That's all part of the respect for the court. That's why people stand when they address the court. You stand because you respect the judge, you respect the court. You have to do that. That's such an important factor in all of this. But that's all I wanted to say.
And Chief Judge Goldberg, I just want to give you, since you raised the issue initially, I want to give you the opportunity to circle back on that issue. And then I'm going to turn to President Judges Wright Padilla and Shields to talk a little bit more about the administrative order that was issued last week.
There's about 29 things I want to say, but I'll pick one. It's been a very good discussion. Look, I appeared as a trial lawyer in front of hundreds of judges. Did I respect the majority of them? Yes. Did I not respect some because maybe I didn't think they did the homework that they needed to do, or they didn't take their job seriously enough? Of course. So I don't think my colleagues and I are saying the public must respect the judiciary because it is the judiciary. I think the problem is more deep-seated in you don't respect the system that Chip so eloquently laid out, such that we have a judge whose primary job is to be objective, and 12 jurors who are selected from around the community who are given information by both sides, with the judge, the objective judge, overseeing how that information is given, who are also objective, who are going to come to the right conclusion most of the time. So there's levels of respect. I respected most judges I tried cases in front of. Some I didn't, But I never, ever, ever thought that any of them were on the take or making decisions solely because they were a Republican judge or a Democrat judge or that the system was rigged. This is the problem. This is the rhetoric that is the problem, and the discussion that needs to counteract it. And it's really hard to do because it's resounding. I mean, we have to push back, and you have to say, well, the judiciary as a whole, which, by the way, our ratings are typically much higher than the other two branches. I just want to say that as far as trust, but the system itself is not rigged. And that's the conversation that needs to happen. And if it doesn't, that's what creates, to take it back to the topic here. If people think the system is rigged and you've taken their family away, their kids away in family court, and they're a little bit unstable, that creates way more risk for violence or threats of violence.
And to that end, as I said, we're going to get back now to the administrative order and the role in state court, the sheriffs play in that. Because we've had a couple of questions in the chat about that administrative order. So President Judges Wright, Padilla, and Shields, I'm going to ask you, we've heard from Judge Shields about some of the impetus that went behind and some of the reasoning behind the need for the order. But if you could give us sort of a little background, as much as you possibly can, about efforts that were made before the administrative order was put into place, as well as what you're hoping the administrative order accomplishes, and whether you've seen any results so far in the week or so since it's been put in place. So Judge Wright, Padilla, we'll go to you first, and then Judge Shields.
Well, I don't want to talk about efforts that we've made behind the scenes, but the order, it's really an interesting administrative order. If you look at the first page, the first whereas clause, it actually talks about the power that the AGB has, the Administrative Governing Board, and what it's born out of. It's born out of the Pennsylvania Constitution, Judicial Administration section, which vests us with the power to do this. It's explained more thoroughly as you look at the following whereas clauses. But it's an important way to manage the court. We don't really think of the Constitution, at least I don't really, when I'm sitting in the courtroom wondering where the sheriff is. but it's an important, I think it's an important authority that the court has, that the court leadership has. And as the leadership of the court has experienced all of these issues that we've been discussing for the past hour or so, the leadership made a decision to issue this order, this administrative order, to fix these problems. These are problems. The security in the court is a problem. However you want to couch it, whatever anyone wants to say, it's a problem. Everybody knows it's the elephant in the room that no one wants to talk about, or no one knows how to talk about, or what to say, or what to do. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to fix the problems. And as I said earlier, I don't know if you remember, this is part of the administration of justice. This is part of our jobs. This is part of what we're supposed to do as the leadership of the court. So what we've asked the sheriff to do, or what we've ordered the sheriff to do, I misspoke, my apologies. What we've ordered the sheriff to do is to come up with a plan, a written plan. And we have enumerated various responsibilities that we asked the sheriff to consider and come up with a written plan to accomplish all of the directives that we have in the order. And the written plan should be completed and submitted within 30 days of the date of this order. And it should be something that can be followed or effectuated within 90 days of the order. I think it's reasonable. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think it covers everything that needs to be covered. I think it's a great order. And
Judge, what happens if the sheriff fails to comply with the order? What are the consequences?
Well, I don't think it's appropriate. Maybe Judge Shields feels different to lay out what our plan of action is. It's almost,
Absolutely.
it's not a real case at this point, but it's almost like litigation. So it wouldn't be appropriate to talk about what our path forward is, but I think it's appropriate to talk about the order. The order was made public, so I don't think there's anything wrong with discussing that.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And certainly we wouldn't, just I guess to give the audience understanding that there is a plan in place, that there would be some consequences if the sheriff failed to comply.
We're all over this.
Of course. Judge Shields, I'll see if you have anything to add.
Yeah, I would just, to sort of reiterate what Judge Wright Padilla said. If you look at this order, you'll see that what we're trying to do, it's not as if we dropped a hammer here, right? What we're trying to do is find out a reasonable way to give the sheriff an opportunity to help us address this problem that we have, and a problem that maybe the sheriff is really the only solution for, at least the practical end of the problem. The sheriff is and how they handle themselves in these courtrooms and how they operate on a day-to-day basis. That's where the solution to this problem on a practical level is. And what we're trying to do is, as I said, we didn't issue an order making any demands. What we've asked for is some sort of reasonable plan or explanation that we can work with to see if we can't solve this problem. And so we're hoping, and by the way, you asked about, if we've seen anything recently. Judge Wright Padilla and I were talking earlier today, and we did notice that in City Hall, both of our chambers are in City Hall, by the way, and traditionally we had a sheriff who would patrol the hallways in City Hall every day, all day long. And for a while now, I haven't seen that sheriff. But just recently, within the last week or so, both Judge Wright Padilla and myself, we were commenting that we have seen the sheriff again. So, maybe that's a good sign. Also, I to get back to what Meredith was saying earlier, this problem is not an attitude on the part of the sheriffs, the frontline sheriffs themselves. It's not. They're not the problem. Those men and women that work the CJC and the other courthouses and the other courtrooms. These are dedicated employees who are trying every day to do their job under really, really difficult and trying circumstances, because security is a dangerous situation. The problem is not the lack of attention to detail or the lack of commitment by the individual sheriffs. And I don't want to give anybody the impression that I think that or that anybody else thinks that. I think everybody who deals with them knows that they're out there trying to do the best they can. So the solution, I think, is and hopefully will be in this plan if the sheriff's office, quote unquote, takes it serious and moves forward and puts together a practical plan that can help us solve the basic security problem that we have in these buildings. And I'm optimistic that that's going to happen. What's going to happen if they don't put a plan together, or if they put one together that just doesn't work? I don't know. We'll have to cross that bridge when we get to it. But we felt we had to do something, and we thought this was the right way to go, because it's, we're not dropping the hammer. We're just trying to open the door for some reasonable reasonable path forward.
And with regard to the original part of the question, I was just gonna clarify that, I wasn't necessarily asking specifically what went into it, but just sort of to give a sense that this wasn't the first step in the process, coming out with this administrative order. It was a result of other efforts that had come before. Is that right, Judge?
Sure. I think it's fair to say that there were other efforts on everybody's
Right.
that came before and brought us to the point where we felt that this was the next best step.
And Judge,
I just want to say, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I just want to say Judge Shields raised an excellent point, and in all this hour and a half discussion, I don't think anyone's pointed out how wonderful the sheriffs have been. The sheriffs that work in the buildings that we've all mentioned, they are terrific. And I believe that many of them are in support of this effort. The reason I believe that is because many of them have told me that. So they're good men and women who take their job seriously. And I want to thank all of them. Thank you, Judge Shields, for raising that point. I want to thank all of the sheriffs that help us out every single day in all the court buildings. They provide such an important, valuable service. They're professional, they're on time, they take their job seriously, and they're great, great people. So I want to just emphasize that.
Thanks, Judge Ripety. I think Meredith mentioned that earlier as well. But that's really important.
Thank you.
No, but that's important to reiterate that, this is not individual line sheriffs. It's an underlying problem that's system-wide, that's not but sheriffs on the whole work hard, and we don't want to lose sight of that. And just a final question that I think is sort of a little bit more broad, and addresses issues related to the practitioners in the audience in addition to the judges. We've been talking about how judicial security impacts the rule of law, primarily from the perspective of how attacks on the judiciary impact those concepts. But I think it's important to note that as practitioners, we also feel the impact of attacks on the judiciary. Just last year, a former Chancellor, Gaten Alfano, was brutally attacked by someone in connection with a case in which he was involved. So I'm going to go around, and if we can, just for the last, we've about 5 minutes left. So if everybody can just take a minute or so and talk about how you believe that everyone in the legal system, practitioners, litigants, or the members of the judiciary, support staff, can work to improve our society so that we can uphold the judicial independence and the concepts of the rule of law that so undergird our democracy. So we'll go in the same order that we started, and start with Chief Judge Goldberg, then the president judges, and then finally to the practitioners.
My answer is more forums like this, more people participating, more committees like the one Chip is on, and more discussion. And I think that, sometimes some of my colleagues say, well, you can't say these things, they're political. I think that we need to understand, as a profession, especially judges, things are being said by politicians that doesn't make it political to respond to. And the example I cited by the Chief Justice, who never speaks about anything, is an example. So robust discussion at all levels is my answer.
Thank you. President Judge Wright Padilla?
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I think better communications between and among attorneys and court staff, better information being dispensed. Can't do this in the dark. people need information about what's going on in the courts. Better communication. We should all communicate. And I think the judge just said that forums like this and other ways to dispense information. That's what I would support.
Thank you. President Judge Shields?
Yeah, I don't think I don't think I could go wrong if I agreed with Judge Goldberg and Judge Ray Padilla. I think they're right on point. I think at this stage, communication is the key. I think also as a practical matter on a day-to-day basis, the people who come before the court, especially the practitioners like yourself, have to think about making sure that they maintain the appropriate level of respect for the court when they're in the court and on the record. And the flip side to that coin is that the judges have to make sure that they behave in a manner that encourages the people who come in front of them to be respectful. And that's a pretty heavy lift too, and we've got to be aware that that's our obligation. But yeah, I think the key now is if we could get the right information out, get it out in the right way, and hopefully it'll have an impact on how people view the courts and maybe make us move forward in a better, more professional way.
Chip?
Henry VI, in Henry VI, Shakespeare has the famous line, the first thing we do is kill all the lawyers, right? And the point, a sort of thought about that is that that's like a funny line about how the lawyers are a pain and they're elites and we should kill the lawyers as part of some kind of revolutionary moment. But actually what Shakespeare was doing at that point was surfacing the idea that the way that you construct, the way that you break down principles of law, how do you create an anarchist, lawless society where might makes right? You kill all the lawyers, which is a metaphor for you destroy the principles, you destroy the system of justice. And while Shakespeare said first thing we do is kill all the lawyers, the analog is we, I don't want to say kill all the judges because that's not the theme I want to offer in any way, shape, or form. But the analog is to break down the system of the judiciary, to break it down as an independent branch of government. This work around that's being described around maintaining a robust, independent, strong, safe judiciary in all of its respects, whether we're talking about independence of judicial thinking or the safety of our courthouses or judicial ethics, all of the dimensions of it are a bulwark for constitutional government that honors and sustains the rule of law. It is not just about the lawyers against the people or the lawyers, the judges against the lawyers or the judges against the people. It's something that we have, I think as lawyers, to the point that Leslie, you made so beautifully, it's something that we all have an opportunity and an obligation to do in the common defense of our constitutional system of government. Whether we're talking about outreach to the community, whether we're talking about lobbying or working across branches of government within our legislatures or executive branches, whether we're talking about the granular issues around sheriffs and staffing and courthouse infrastructure and logistics, right? These rule of law issues are not just lofty issues; they're incredibly granular issues as well. This is all in the service of some of the most important work that we can do as lawyers, and judges, which is in addition to representing our clients or making honest and fair decisions to advocating for and defending our basic principles of constitutional government. So it is it's incredibly important work, but it's always been important work. It always will be important work. And I think to the question that was asked, Jen, that you raised earlier, this is an international issue. If you're an autocrat and you want to become more autocratic, what do? You tear down the judges, right? The independence of the judiciary is a sort of, if you want a quick look at the health of a constitutional system, look at the health of the judiciary. That's true all over the world. It's true here. And so I just look forward to working with everyone on this common project.
Thanks, Chip. Leslie?
Building on something that Judge Shields said about judges behaving, I think that we as lawyers have an obligation to behave. Particularly, I'm thinking about one of the judges earlier mentioned about pro se parties. We litigate a lot of times against pro se parties or people whose families are there watching. We have an obligation to behave well, not to feed the fire, not to inflame people, taking the high road, acting above board. That's one way that we can help to build faith in the system, that it's not rigged, that it's not just for certain kinds of people. So that's just one thing that we as lawyers can do.
Thanks, Leslie. And finally, Meredith?
Thank you. Okay, so very briefly, I would just say two things. One, just to follow up on the comment about communication, better communication, also transparency. These are public courtrooms. Judges encourage the public to come and watch, whether they're students or just, members of the media or whoever, to come and observe court. I think the more people interact with the court system, maybe in a way that, they're not there for their own case, but just to see what happens, develops a better understanding of how the system works and, the work that lawyers and judges have to do every day. And also when judges are issuing decisions, making sure those decisions are being explained clearly. Frustration builds from a lack of understanding. And so I think the more we explain and the more we communicate, the better off we all are. And just again, as I said earlier, investment in legal services, access to the courts, access to justice in general, whether it's civil side, criminal side. I think will have a huge impact in how people perceive the courts and how their cases move through the system. So the more we invest in legal services, I think also is, we'll see a different outcome potentially.
Thanks, Meredith. And thanks to all of you. I'm so grateful for all of you participating today. To our panelists, your insight was invaluable. I hope this is a first of continued conversations that we have regarding this issue. It's something that's been incredibly important. It's one of the foundational principles of our Bar Association, access to justice and the rule of law and judicial independence. And it plays just a critical role in our profession. So I hope it's just the first of many conversations. Thank you to all of you for your leadership on this issue. Thank you to our participants for your active participation. And there were a number of questions that we didn't get to, including potential future programs. So for those who've emailed and sent messages about that in the chat, I promise to follow up with you about that and follow up with our panelists as well. So thank you all. And I appreciate you all being here for our last Chancellor's Forum of 2024.